It's FoosTalk Live.
You talking to me?
Compelling and lively banter.
Are you going to talk to us?
Talking foosball.
Foosball was how I measured my value as a man. You took that away.
Players and fans, promoters and pros. Unedited and raw.
Talk.
Living in the moment.
We have a lot of important things to talk about.
All while practicing social distancing.
Cool. We'll talk. No big whoop.
Let's get this thing started. FoosTalk Live. Coming to you live from the studios of Foosball Radio and inside of Foos TV. It's the 42nd episode of FoosTalk Live. Brought to you in part by 518 Prints, one of the best printers of promotional items, t-shirts, jackets, hoodies, and foosball apparel. Visit 518prints.com today. Brought to you in part by Foosballers, the movie. Download the copy of your copy right now of Joe Hesslinger, this documentary at foosballersthemovie.com. And brought to you by the United States Table Soccer Organization, the USTSO, helping to usher in a new era of competitive foosball. Become a member and register at usafoosball.com. And, of course, FoosTalk Live is also brought to you by Foosball Clubs USA, promoting foosball through school systems all over the country. Visit foosballclubsusa.com and make a donation today. Well, hey there, I'm Tom Robinson. We are back together again for another edition of FoosTalk Live. And yes, we are celebrating a truly super weekend in sports, of course.
Mhm.
And of course, if you remove the letter T from the word football and replace it with an S, you get the word foosball. And that's what we're all about here. Celebrating a super weekend means we needed to do something special. So tonight, for the duration of our 42nd episode, we're going to be looking into the past, the present, and of course, the future of foosball. And our special guest happens to be the founder and member of Foosball Clubs USA, one of our wonderful sponsors. Please welcome back to the FoosTalk Live arena. It's John O'Brien. Hello, John.
Hey, hi there, Tom. How are you?
I'm
So,
well. I'm well.
a
Thank you.
special weekend, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are some people that just can't resist the commercials during the Super Bowl, and
Uh-huh.
I have to put Jim and Mark in that category. So, you know, it's just their compulsion, and I have a feeling, especially for Mark, it's probably the food more than likely for the foosball, for
Uh,
football.
don't want to get sidetracked, but when I taught video production in school, because I was a tech teacher,
Oh
uh,
yeah,
we loved the Super Bowl commercials.
right.
And we would study them and we would look at them and we'd analyze them, and they were great
Oh,
for me in many years. I mean, because even if you don't care who's playing, the commercials were usually fabulous.
Right. So I'm wondering, what are they charging now for a 30-second commercial now on the Super Bowl?
Oh, I don't know, but we did look into it at the time, and it was millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So that was an education all in itself.
Think about that per second, what they're
Yeah,
paying per second.
exactly.
Isn't that
Yeah.
it's astounding. Well, someday there's going to be this, I know it's happened in the past, but shall we say, the Super Bowl of foosball rather than football. And
Mhm.
gee, wouldn't it be nice to get several $1 million for a 30-second ad on a foosball tournament or something, or broadcast for that matter? Wouldn't that be
Uh,
cool?
Not sure where you wanted to go with that, but certainly there is room to envision a true pro tour with sponsors like you have for the PGA and for tennis.
Yep,
That is definitely a possibility,
sure.
and that's part of growing the player base. Is you also grow the viewer base,
Right.
and those who are going to sponsor a real legitimate pro tour, they want eyeballs on the program, and that is definitely a possibility.
Cool. Well, John, at the risk of embarrassing you,
Uh-oh.
there are a lot of, shall we say, people along the way. The history of foosball, of course, many people have had, shall we say, a visionary, a visionary perspective when it comes to foosball. You, of
Mhm.
course, being one of those, especially with the formation of this thing called Foosball Clubs USA. Just give us a quick overview. What happened? How did the germ of this idea come to be? And what kind of a struggle did you have to go through in order to make it happen?
I'll give you the short version now, the Reader's
Okay.
Digest one. I know the first time I was on, it was a much lengthier one. I started a program at school after bringing a table in, and
Hmm.
I simply wanted my students. They showed an interest, so I wanted them to be able to play other schools,
Oh,
and so um, we played in our after school program. That's where it started. Um,
so now just to clarify for those who may not know, you're the technology teacher at Walcott
Yep,
High School.
technology teacher at Northwest Wolcott, and I
Gotcha.
brought a table in from home. And one thing led to another. The school saw that the students were interested, so when they were looking for an after-school activity,
Hmm.
we have a 3 to 5 program. Um, I pitched the idea of foosball, and I would teach the class. I would run it. So we bought 2 home model tornado tables.
Wow.
Dave Corrington helped us pick those up. He was still over at Valley Dynamo at the time. And after 2 years of running our in-house program and competing, in-house tournaments, I said to the kids, how'd you like to play against other schools? And they were all excited.
Really?
Well, the problem was there were no other schools to go compete against.
Right.
So I took a table on the road and started putting on clinics. And
Clinics.
one thing led to another, and I realized that
Now hold on,
okay,
just to let me
we're
clarify this again. Now, when you say clinic, now you took this table, what, you picked it up and put it in a truck and drove it to another
Mhm.
school,
Yep, yep.
set it up
And then we
in like
we
the
haul it into the school,
okay.
turn it sideways to get through the doorways, um, and put out clinics and
And
realize that okay, there's room for either a company to try to buy tables well from manufacturers and give schools a good price, or become a nonprofit
mhm,
and basically accomplish the same thing. But we don't buy the tables; we just put the schools in touch with the
right.
manufacturers
Okay,
and let
okay.
them do it. But we come alongside the schools and help them to see that hey, foosball is an activity that many of your students will be attracted to, and
Sure.
so that's what happened.
Wow.
Back in 2015, we some other educators, myself, we said, look, let's become a nonprofit and see where it goes.
I know it
Uh,
sounds obvious for me to ask it, but, when you put on a clinic at a school, what was the general reaction of the kids?
oh, yeah. I mean, you don't have to ask. As a foosball player, you know that kids
Yes.
love foos,
Yes.
and so there was no problem with the kids
Mm,
wanting to play.
okay.
Uh, and sometimes um, we were able to manage a second table, and that was beneficial.
Nice.
Because you'd have 20 kids who are excited to come out for this demonstration and then get to play, and you learn how to
Mhm.
just very quickly teach super simple rules and let them have fun. You
Yeah.
know,
Step back and watch the fun. No,
right,
it's
right.
interesting. I think that, especially these days because kids are so engrossed in that, electronic screen they carry in their pockets.
Mhm.
How do you get them to not pay attention to that? That's a task.
Well, uh, of course, that's the beauty of foosball. Is it really uh, sells itself?
Yes.
When I brought a table into school, one of my daughters played with me a lot, and when she went off to college, the other kids said, "Dad, get this table out of the living room." So I did. I took it to school, put it in one of my labs. We had a little alcove area, and I was not intending to start anything. I just had to get it out of the house, um, and 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 I should have been surprised, but kids were rushing down early to class to get a couple of balls in before class started.
Right.
They'd come in during lunch, they'd come in after school, and after a year or two of just doing that in my classroom, I realized, okay, there's something to this. I
Yeah.
shouldn't have been surprised because I loved foosball, but I wasn't thinking of starting any kind of program. But
Okay. Gotcha.
apparently the time was right,
Yeah.
because you know, uh, obviously we're talking about the past of foosball. Back in the heyday when foosball tables were, the
Everywhere.
bars and bowling
Yeah.
alleys and rec
Recreation
centers.
centers. Yeah.
All of a sudden, video games came in
Mhm.
and pushed out not only foosball but pushed out pinball and some other things.
Everything else.
Um, but now uh, kids don't need to go to the arcade.
Right. Yeah.
They have a game system at home,
Yeah.
multiple game systems. They
Yeah.
have phones that have games on them, and so it's like we have this window now where we could bring foosball back, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a felt need. Kids, they're not really engaging with another person, at least not face to face. There's a lot of online
Right.
gaming now, and there's nothing wrong with those online communities. And many of my students stay connected
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
way.
Okay.
But many kids are just playing against the computer,
Yeah.
and there's no social interaction,
Well,
even against your competitor.
and of
Um,
course, foosball. Forgive me for saying this, but it is a sport. Even though some people just think of it
yeah.
as a tavern game, it's a sport. Now,
Mhm.
of course, when it comes to other sports within school, save something like tennis or golf, most other sports like full contact football, let's say, or basketball, you've got to be physically, shall we say, superior in some cases in order to be the best. But with foosball, all that's taken away. So
And now you're touching, Tom, on some of the messaging, and I have to admit, I I was not a visionary.
okay.
I was just a guy that liked playing foosball and thought, okay, I guess my kids will enjoy it too.
Mhm, mhm.
I was not really thinking about the larger ramifications of foosball in schools when I brought my table in, or even when I started the foosball program. I wasn't thinking, I wasn't recognizing
Yeah,
all the great things that we've come now to see. After a few years, you
got it.
start realizing, oh, um, these are many kids who are not involved in other activities, but
Okay.
they're somehow gravitating toward foosball. Um, it isn't a level playing field. You know,
Right.
um, I when I was in eighth grade, I was the height I am now, 5'7",
Okay.
and in eighth grade, I was like tall. Uh,
Mhm. Yep.
but in 10th grade, I was short.
Ah, makes a
So
big difference, right?
my basketball career was over.
Right.
You know,
Right, right,
you
right.
know,
I know what you
uh,
mean.
and I not large, to play football. And so in some sports, natural ability, size is definitely advantage, and not to take away anything from the folks that just really press through and play hard anyway,
Yeah.
even though they don't have the natural gifting. But with foosball, that's basically gone.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how tall, or how physically fit. And in fact, um, that's one of the areas that we are really trying to focus on
Okay.
are the like the special needs, the physically handicapped,
Yes.
because um, there are opportunities for some of these kids who are, mentally competitive
Mhm.
to get in and play foosball, and not just against other disabled kids,
Right.
but they can play against all the able-bodied kids
Right.
as well.
The general
Um,
population, just to say the least. Yeah,
yeah.
that's exciting. It's so. Let me ask you this question: in retrospect, now, when you think back to those early days and what you started to see that you didn't expect, what was the biggest surprise? What pleased you the most about the things you didn't expect?
Good question. And this comes up often. Um, we have students in our various programs,
Hmm.
and we have 29 programs in 10 states now, which is just really scratching the surface.
Yeah.
When you think of just how large the country is, and how many schools there are, so
Sure.
that's a drop in the bucket. But we're very pleased with the athletes and the student council kids and the A students and the other very active students who play foosball, and we do have many. But the students that we are most excited about are the ones who nothing that the school was doing seemed to draw them in.
Ah.
They were not involved in the musicals or the
Okay.
sports programs or chess or anything like that, and yet something about foosball seemed to be appealing to them.
Huh.
And we're measuring this not just by, oh, they were in the after school program and they played foosball while there. We're talking about students that started in our after school program as fifth or sixth graders
Okay.
that continued to play foosball even when they were too old to be in the after school program. they would come back as mentors
Really?
to the younger. Oh, yeah, they would come back as mentors to the younger kids,
Huh.
uh, and they would come to the Saturday tournaments. And these again are students that were not involved in any other school activity, and so those are the students that we're most excited about
Yeah.
because there's ample evidence from all sorts of organizations that show if you can connect students to school in some way through
Yep.
some club or sport or activity, you know, their grades will improve, their mental health will improve, the sense of connectedness and relationships will improve because they feel a part.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't want to feel a part of something?
Sure. No,
And
it's
so
a community.
by finding something that they could connect with, all of a sudden they had a school identity. You know,
Right.
one of our fellas, his name is Joe, started with us in seventh grade and didn't get involved in anything else. Ended up being the foosball club vice president his junior and senior year, and so he was somebody. He was looked up to by the younger players. He had
Huh.
an identity, and it was great. And there's many stories like that
Right.
of where foosball just fit the need of that particular student.
Right. No,
So
it's extraordinary because, of course, I know many teachers, teachers that are good friends and relatives, and the thing they always struggle with is how do we connect with the kids that are just on the periphery? They're on the
mhm, yep.
they're not they're not readily jumping into and involve themselves in a class necessarily. The challenge, of course, is not the kids that are into it, but those that are not.
Right, and with some of the students that we've seen, and getting in and kind of peeling back the layers and getting involved in their lives more than just being in the classroom. But coaches seem to have a special place in the life of students, and many student
Sure.
athletes will tell you that.
Yep.
And if you get involved in musicals and plays, your directors, your music director, have a special role in your life. And what we would find is that many of these young folks, it's not like they were not interested in anything. Some weren't. They truly weren't
Mm,
interested in anything. Nothing caught their attention. But some, uh, their circumstances wouldn't allow them.
right. Right.
If they wanted to play a sport, well, most sports are every day after school from 3 to 5.
Sure.
And maybe they just couldn't do that. They had to get a younger sibling off the bus a
Mm,
few times a week, and so
or
you can't say, "Coach, I can only be at practice, 2 days a week."
mhm.
It's like, well, sorry. Um, where they could get involved in our foosball program uh, in a 1 or 2 day a week activity
Yep.
and feel fully involved,
Very
and come to
interesting.
the weekend activities. So, um, yeah,
So
it's
now,
a very flexible program.
now, if we visit your website right now, foosballclubsusa.com, I noticed some interesting stats there. Now, I don't know how up to date this is, but it says there are 85 tables in schools as part of this program, 3,772 students currently active in some way. Are those stats correct?
Uh, I can't account for the 3,000 number. I'd have to look at that, but definitely the number of tables in schools that we track. How many tables are in particular schools or youth centers
Hmm.
through our program? Um, and absolutely, yeah,
Wow. That's
uh,
astounding. And this is
yeah.
and how many years
But
did it take to
again,
do this?
Tom, we're talking how many students in the country.
Yeah.
you know
Right. Right.
so
Right.
again, it's like
Still.
drop in the bucket.
Right.
And these numbers for the reports that we publish, because there's various times that we need to publish reports. One is when we apply for our USTSO applies for the ITSF,
Hmm.
International Table Soccer Federation annual membership.
Okay.
I also publish reports that I report to the USTSO because Foosball Clubs USA is functioning as the youth committee
Wow.
for
Yeah.
USTSO
Okay.
because Foosball Clubs USA started in 2015. The current USTSO started in 2018.
Gotcha.
So instead of them duplicating efforts, they just said, "Hey, can you kind of come alongside and be the youth committee
Oh,
for
well, that
our
makes sense.
organization.
So
And so that's what we're
they
doing.
recognize that
And
right from the
so
beginning, right? So here's something that's already built in. We can bring you on board, and that part's covered.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and so we publish reports, and so what we do annually is we poll our school mentors, and we say, how many students from your program? Is it lunchtime? Is it a club? Is it after school
Right.
program? How many tables? And so that's how we compile our reports.
Wow. Very, very cool. And USTSO, of course, United States Table Soccer Organization, has just recently had a very large push in the direction of doing club work when it comes to not just students now, but of course for adults alike and all across the country. And can you give us an idea as to how that's going?
Yeah, there's um, what's exciting. I feel privileged, to be part of the foosball community.
Yes.
It was not something that I strove to be a part of. I just loved playing foosball. But it's such a small community that anybody who's active in doing things to contribute immediately has like a place at the table,
Mm-hmm.
because folks recognize, oh, that's going to benefit our community. And so yeah, there have been a number of people, Jim, has brought it up on these programs in the past, who
Right.
have envisioned a committee, or I mean a club system, and part of the mission of USCSO, and it's been adopted by the board of directors, the executive committee, is to move in this direction, and we've had some very great efforts, a good kind of a foundation established.
Sure.
Jerry Todd did a lot of initial work after Terry Rue was the first president of USTSO, and tasked Jerry with doing that.
Okay.
And Jerry took many of his cues from what was happening in other countries. He like many players, they traveled abroad and saw that, oh, there's local clubs, kind of like you would have
Yeah.
a bowling league or club, or martial arts, or darts or something.
It's so common
And,
too.
and so there is a framework that has been kind of envisioned and established on paper, and we've begun rolling it out, and we've opened it up for folks to register.
Mm.
But we need to make some bigger pushes. But some of that is just communicating and taking time to kind of get the word out.
Well, it is. I mean, when you think about organizing the entire country, let's say, and basing it on other things that are out there already, I mean, it's still a Herculean task. There's a
Oh, it
lot to be
is, yeah.
done, and
Yeah,
so
and Jerry did a great thing. He went and, with consultation with some other people, broke up the country into 5, he's calling them conferences,
hmm
uh, and went about and established, found someone who'd be like the head of that conference, uh, and now we're just waiting to kind of get everybody together and say, okay, well, here's a framework. What's our next step? What's our
right.
1-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, and begin finding out what people would like to do. And you know what? The board has been great,
Okay.
and they've recognized. We're talking about the USTSO board, have recognized that, as USTSO, we're here to represent everybody,
Yes.
the recreational player to the elite international player and everybody in between. You know, and so it's not a either or; it's all of it.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, that's the way it is with other sports and activities. There
Oh,
are
sure.
my dad, he's 92.
hmm
He's been blessed with good health, um, and he has been bowling for years, and he continues to bowl
Wow.
each week in a bowling league.
That's terrific.
And no aspirations of being a pro bowler, but he just wants to bowl. So
Well,
he gets together with buddies, and they bowl each week, every Friday.
I can see, myself and a couple of my buddies who are the same age. I mean, I'm 62. I still want to play that Friday DYP every week, man.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
care as long as I can still stand up and hold it. But
Well,
I don't
we
see
we have
stopping.
we have the tables. If you're ever in a wheelchair, there's a
Right.
place for you,
Yeah.
right? So you don't have to stand up.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. I forgot about that. But
yeah,
no, it is true. And again, foosball, I think, is a great equalizer. Someone who's in their 60s can still compete. Well, take Todd Lafredo, for instance.
yeah.
Still playing at the top of the game. Still playing
Well,
at the top of the game.
well, and I was saying in jest, about when we get older, but uh, folks who do get older and can't stand at the table,
Hmm.
well, like I said, there's provision for that.
Right.
And so really, if somebody's hooked on playing, foosball, there are ways, that there's the Ribeiro sport is one good example that
Sure.
makes a table that you can sit down and get right up to the table. And so maybe you can't stand, but you can still play.
Sure. Absolutely.
So
Competitively, no less, which is great.
absolutely, that's it. Yeah.
So give me a quick idea here. When it comes to approaching a school currently, now you have a formula, clearly, something that you do. Um, what are the first hurdles you have to overcome to get a school to jump on board and become part of Foosball Clubs USA?
So Tom, so much depends. You say we have a formula. Well, it's kind of like we didn't have a formula. We didn't know we
Okay.
needed a formula.
Uh-huh.
We didn't know that we were going to be approaching schools. But as time has gone on, what we have found is certain ways to approach a school, and it almost always starts with playing 20 questions.
Gotcha.
Our
Gotcha. Gotcha.
desire is to come alongside the school and help them envision for themselves
Okay.
how table soccer, how foosball can help them. So it's not really like a hard sell. It's usually there was somebody that had to open the door because
Hmm.
it's not a readily accepted school activity across the board. So it's not like, oh, your soccer goals busted and let us help you find new soccer goals. It's they don't know that foosball is an activity that will benefit their students. And
Hmm.
so usually there's somebody who has paved the way a little bit. A staff member who's a foosball player, a community member who has a relationship with the school. And so we start with uh, what can you envision? All right. And then as we listen to them and find out what their goals are, by this time we probably have a school that's similar
Okay.
or had similar needs. And we say,
Gotcha.
okay, well, you want something for lunchtime activities. And we have lunchtime programs, and we now have models of how a lunchtime program can look, which is
Okay.
different
Yeah.
than the after school program because it's usually a half-hour time period. And you've
Yeah.
got,
Short.
at least in my school, we had like 25 middle schoolers all wanting to play on two tables during lunch. And so we had to come up with certain guidelines and rules, like, uh, sometimes we'd have to say 3-point games
Yeah. Right. Play the three.
instead
Yeah.
of five.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
3-point games, and you can win twice, and then you're off. You have to get back in the
Okay.
rotation. So
So,
simple
so
things
you
like
can't
that.
dominate the table, yeah?
If it's an after school program, we talk about um, the benefits of table soccer, and we talk about how it can benefit and draw in their students, which that's what they want.
Yes.
They want engaged students, and so we
Right.
start with listening, and then we start sharing what we've seen happen in other situations.
Okay.
And as they show interest, we give them more, and then the questions arise about who's going to teach the program, where we're going to put the tables,
Yeah.
how do you get the tables, and and
Logistics.
and those all have answers. But we start by listening.
Sure. Wow. Okay. So, and you're starting to see more and more success. What's as far as the school districts that are now currently involved? What's the most successful example you can use? Who's done the best?
Well, we uh, we haven't had any. We don't have a ranking system yet.
Okay.
Maybe we will, but a number of schools have done extremely well, and it's how they've done it.
Okay.
And the measure of success in our minds again is continuity,
Hmm.
student engagement, um, and some schools. There's three in Denver area that unfortunately were kind of going into their second year of communication and cooperative planning,
Sure.
and COVID hit. You know,
Oh, yeah.
they ended up holding one multi-school event. Ray Cordova was gracious enough to open up his facility on a weekend,
Cool.
and the kids came in, and he, and just from his account of it, just had a blast. And so that was the first. And so the second year, obviously, you would have had this momentum because students would have talked to their other kids about how much fun they had last year.
Yes.
And so there was an immediate success. And what's fascinating there was they had success in a multi-event in like the second year of operation,
Yes.
where in New York State it took us longer
Huh.
because we were more spread out. It wasn't an established thing, and so each time we have success in one area, it's like a model of what could happen in another area.
Okay.
So in New York State, we were functioning sort of in a discoordinated way for a couple of years until we started connecting. And then now in New York State, because we were the first state to have it, because this is where I am, uh, we've had 5 big New York State tournaments
Right.
with like 50 kids a piece at them, and of course we were going to
Yeah.
have you up at our last one that got canceled
Yeah.
uh, due to COVID. But and now another measure of success is, do they reach out to other area schools?
Right.
Okay. There's a school over in Rhode Island that had a program, been operating for a couple of years, and I thought they only had one table. And just recently, I found out that no, they had kind of gotten other tables in there, and now they had a goal to reach out to neighboring schools
Right.
because they wanted to expand what they were doing. And so that's another measure of success. Are they trying to, include other school districts so that their students will have that extra layer of experience of competing against other schools?
Sure, sure. No,
Yeah.
it seems to me, especially back in the day of middle school when we were, bowling,
Mhm.
as middle school kids, we were playing, other kids from other schools that were coming into town,
Yep.
and busing them in. And then later on, when of course, when I got into more scholastically based things like track and stuff, we were traveling to meets and things like this, which I gotta say was an absolute blast. It was the trip there and back that was the most fun.
Oh,
Uh, you know,
field trips are that way, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
The bus
So
ride, yeah.
so that
Another measure of success has been less programmatic
okay,
and much more personal. Um, the accounts that we'll hear from mentors of improved attendance at school because either intrinsic motivations of the student who realizes if I'm not in school, I can't play,
yep,
or maybe it's external pressures of you have an official foosball club, and there are guidelines that okay, if you can't attend your club meetings if you owe assignments and you
right,
have to go meet with teachers after school.
right.
And so there's a motivation to get your activities done so you can go to your foosball club meeting.
Well,
Uh,
that's always the problem with any sport, right? I mean, they've got to pass their grades before they can
exactly.
play.
Yeah. And so as foosball becomes integrated into school life,
Hmm.
um, it's used in a positive way.
Right.
In my school, I know firsthand our assistant principal, who's oftentimes it's the assistant principal who's charged of discipline,
Hmm.
would contact me, particularly if it was a student that was not involved in any other club or activity. So there's no other like leverage,
Hmm.
and say, hey, so and so got written up again in class. Can you talk to them? And because you have this connection, and maybe the ability to say, maybe you should take a day or two off, and let's see if you can go the rest of the week without getting a write up.
Sure, sure.
And then come back.
So that
And,
kind
and
of
so there are positive dynamics
so
to using the game that they love.
and that leads me to my next question. What are the positives you're seeing when it comes to students?
Well, again, we have definitely seen the attendance situations, but
Okay.
of course, to measure that, you would have had to have a student that had poor attendance. Okay,
Yes.
so that's only a limited area. The next is what I'd mentioned of the students who are not involved in any school activity, and often they also were not very connected with their classmates.
Mm.
And we have seen tremendous situations in multiple schools where there are students now from different peer groups, or some who don't belong to any group,
Yep.
because they're
The
not
out
joiners,
the outliers.
uh, all of a sudden they have a group.
Huh.
Again, I can speak most powerfully of my own situation. The Tuesday after Christmas, I had five kids over here. Four of them who are graduated already, who started playing foosball with us in like sixth or seventh grade.
Okay.
That played all the way through high school, and now that they're even graduated, they have this group that they want to get together with.
Yes.
And some of those fellas, they were athletes. They went on to be involved in other programs, but some foosball was it. That's
Wow.
all they did.
That's
You know,
great.
and so the connection there is okay. Would these kids gotten to know each other? Would they have hung out? Would they
Yeah.
have developed a friendship since they weren't in anything together before?
Prior to
But
that.
now
Yeah.
that they were part of the foosball program, they felt a bond,
Huh.
and so there's new friendships, that maybe wouldn't have been developed. Um,
Yes.
so
Well, it's like everything else that happens to kids when they're struggling to learn to become a part of society, right? It's learning social skills. When it comes to foosball, what specifically do you think, as far as skill sets, do kids learn just because they've played foosball?
are you talking skill dynamic, or are you
Well,
talking
anything when it comes
like
to living
character
living a
development?
life, like being a person who's well adjusted and ready to fit into society. What's the benefit there?
Uh, that's kind of tied in with some of the other dynamics that we've talked about. And
Yes.
and again, I've heard accounts from our other mentors. I can speak most powerfully from my own experience with students. And again, this is going back to 2012 when we first started, even before Foosball Clubs USA, and then since then with Foosball Clubs USA. But the whole win loss cycle
Yes.
is faster. 5 to 7 minutes, you're winning or losing a game. And
Mhm.
for some students, if they're not involved in anything competitive, that's a growing experience.
Yeah.
They'd not had a coach or a parent who taught them about winning and losing, and we've had some very dramatic accounts of students that were definitely not good winners, and they were even worse losers.
Really?
Uh,
Go
and one
figure.
fella, one fella, he was he's a very competitive fellow. He was someone who, when he was able to do school sports, went out for school sports.
Okay.
But in fifth and sixth grade, when you can't do school sports, foosball became that sort of competitive outlet for him.
Yes.
And he had a partner, buddy who used to play an awful lot with, and what when they were losing, it was his buddy's fault.
Oh boy. Oh
you
boy.
know, and he would get on his buddy, about what was going on, and it was really great because his partner is real even keeled fella. Turned to him and said, if this is the way you're gonna act, I don't know if I want to be your partner
Yeah,
anymore.
right. Right, right.
And it's like, whoa, that was a good eye opener. But I mean, it didn't fix the problem. There were numerous times over, maybe 3 years where I had to just kind of gently pull him aside and talk about his attitude,
Yep.
both on the table, off the table. Our first New York State tournament, he was in eighth grade.
Okay.
He went to the finals in singles
Wow.
and lost in third game, one ball,
Oh,
stormed away from the table.
oh
you
boy.
know, where he should have been the first one to shake the hand across the table of the guy who just beat him, because
Sure.
the two of them took it to the last ball,
Yeah.
and no, and it was kind of a sad situation. But that same fella went on to be quite a mentor in high school. He actually
Really?
ended up being voted as the president of our foosball club
No kidding.
his junior and senior year by his classmates,
That's amazing.
and would talk openly about his blunders and his bad attitude. And it's like, whoa, this
Yeah.
this came about, because we were able to interact over the foosball table.
John,
Uh,
we have a question from the UK. How old are kids in the 5th and 6th grade in this country?
oh, I always have to do a little backtracking. Eighth graders about 13. So you're talking, 11, 12.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. 11, 12. Yeah. Thanks for that
Yep.
question, by the way, from the UK. Somebody's
Yep.
awake in the UK tonight. I'm impressed by that. So,
Any idea who that is?
Reese Roberts. Yeah.
Oh,
He's sent us a question tonight, and he was one of the first to join us on Foos Talk Live. By the way, if you just tuned in to Foos Talk Live this evening, we are speaking a very special evening because it is a super weekend. We're talking about a super sport called foosball, and of course the past, present, and future of foosball is in the hands of the youth, of the young kids coming up through the system. And John O'Brien of Foosball Clubs USA has very graciously agreed to spend time with us talking about how to do this, how this is all happening, what's it all about. So if you just tuned in, that's what we're all about tonight. So if you have a question, you can either type it in or you can also call us directly if you'd like on Foos Talk Live. John, let's switch gears a bit here.
okay.
When it comes to this idea of putting together, shall we say, new systems that will bring more people into this sport, because that's really what we're all about here. How do we do this? What's from your perspective? What's missing?
COVID has been bad in many ways,
Oh yeah, of
but
course.
it's
Yeah.
also been very good. Maybe I'm just looking at the silver lining, but it's provided many in the foosball community with the opportunity to kind of step back,
Yep.
um, because people are passionate about what they're doing, and so they're training, they're competing, they're going out to local DYPs, they're traveling to tournaments, you know, uh, but what we've found is that because it's a small community and everybody who's involved is almost everybody that's involved is involved as a player.
Mm,
And
gotcha.
so they're busy playing.
Yep.
And so the COVID has helped people kind of step back and think of what can we do differently? What can we do to expand? And so what's happening is you're hearing much more talk about how can we reach out to new players? What are we doing that's not helpful?
Right.
What could we be doing that is helpful? Um, and so there's a number of ways to answer the question. Um, One would be, uh, and I've heard this from many players who come up to me and say, "Boy, I love what you're doing. I'd love to see more players get involved, but somebody new comes to our DYP, and there's always
Mhm.
often somebody there who just rubs their hands and says, "Ah, good, fresh meat,"
Right.
somebody to beat up on,
Or that
rather than
the opposite, sort of like, oh, please, I have to play with this person now. This person who's
yeah,
never played before.
or if they draw them, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But so for players, existing players, to and many are beginning to do this, and this is not unique. There are a number of players who would like to see some form of drawing new players in, player development, and
Mhm.
oftentimes that's thought of as youth, but there's many adults, or people returning to the game.
Sure.
You know, I I played in college. I ended up being pretty competitive in my college years, but then I got away from it for many years as I raised a family.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah.
And then I got back in, and it's like, ooh, it's a different game. It was
Mhm.
much more competitive,
Oh,
than
yeah.
I had remembered. Um, and so for players to purposefully, and this is too, Tom, where clubs could play a role. When you go into a tournament, obviously the idea is to win.
Yeah.
That's not the time to be being nice to people and training them. So when you go into a DYP, even, you're there to win.
Yeah.
But if you have a club, now players come in and you could have a training, a mentoring
Oh.
s- program
And
where
this
they're being brought along and
does
they're
work.
being taught the skills,
Yep.
not by being crushed, but by being mentored.
Right.
And
Shown the
so
ropes.
that could be a very purposeful goal of a player group, is to build their player base
Yeah.
by being attractive to non-players.
I have to say a great example of that in the 716 in Buffalo, New York, Matt McCrory, who's promoter there, who's doing a lot of
Uh-huh.
work. He has a beginner's night. I mean, it's
Yeah,
exclusively for beginners. There's no pros allowed, no advanced players. And he said they have 25 people show up sometimes. Not to say
sure.
they stay with it necessarily, but they show up. So
Yep. Yep.
that's half the battle right there.
Yeah. So to answer your question, what can we do? We have to find a way of reaching out to the or at least at the moment, non-foosball players.
Right.
And so that one example is how to draw in people that want to be foosball players. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
is to have systems that train them and not crush them. Another way to do it is there are many uh, school officials, many community members
Yes.
who don't particularly like a specific sport or game or
Hmm.
activity, but see the value in offering it to their community or to their school.
Okay.
And so they're not really a soccer player, but they see that some students are. And
Sure.
so they think that the school should offer that. And so by communicating to the community that foosball is not just a bar sport,
Yeah.
it is a disciplined activity, can be, that it is a social activity, that there are definite social and emotional benefits to it,
Yes.
that can change the mindset and get schools and communities on board with offering table soccer as an activity
Now that you
for
mentioned
a broad audience.
you mentioned this idea, this I don't know, maybe it's a taboo topic, but the idea that foosball is considered a tavern or a bar sport,
Mhm.
or a bar game. Pardon me for saying that; it's a dirty word. Um, but
What, bar or game?
bar game, yeah, it's a bar. It's a sport. It can be an Olympic sport. But no, for us, I mean, we understand that, but how do you get around those preconceived notions? Some people say, "Oh, well, when I was in college, they had one of those things in a bar that I hung out in. I've never seen it
Mhm.
anywhere else, and why would we want to have that in my school? That's a horrible image for kids." They look at the stigma rather than the advantage.
Sure. Uh, for me, it's been simply an opportunity to acknowledge that, yeah,
Sure.
it's played in bars, and that's where I first learned to play it. Well,
Yep.
actually, for me, it was a college rec room,
Uh-huh.
but
Yeah.
then quickly the competition was out in the bars. Um, but to say, look, it's not an either or. That is a fun activity that folks
Sure.
play in a bar or in the bowling alley or roller rink, but it's also a home sport.
Mhm.
People have tables at home. They can play it recreationally for fun, and we start showing them that it's much more than a bar sport. So it
Right.
is,
Right.
and we have no intention of taking that to bars, but it's much more than just a bar sport and can be used as a legitimate sport activity for people of all ages. Like I
Yeah.
mentioned, my dad is a 92-year-old bowler.
Yeah.
Well, we can have kids playing foosball, and then they're playing when they're 92. Um,
Well, when it comes to your role with Foosball Clubs USA, because really that's your baby. How many people currently are in the organization with you, and what are their
Hmm.
positions?
There are many.
Okay.
So there's at least one person for each of those 29 programs.
Okay.
Uh, in some, there ends up being more because I'll take Mark Drillette's program. Uh, Not only did Mark, he's a teacher at the
Yes.
school. He started the Foosball Club, but there are staff members who've recognized the value of what foosball is doing,
Mm-hmm.
and his local student tournaments will be sponsored by the Teachers Association.
Really?
Yeah, and so they'll pay for the
Wow.
trophies,
That's
and
cool.
so he's involved people not directly in foosball instruction, but they've come alongside to help the program.
Okay.
In uh, in Denver, you know, there's at least two people involved in each of the programs there that I'm aware of, and
Okay.
there's probably support staff that I'm not aware of, but who all make it happen. Okay, um, Daniel and Sandy Luaris in Denver ran a program, but they're not teachers, they're not staff members, and so
Right.
they had to work through their after-school coordinator
Ah.
to introduce foosball as an activity. And so, you know, in a sense, we're part of that school's program as much as the non-foosball people are part of our program, so to speak.
Right.
Um, so um,
Here's what
then
I
we
here's
also
a
we have some board members. One Deb, who is came alongside us,
okay.
not as a foosball player, but she is a mental health worker, and became aware of students in her school that were going down to a comic shop. Um,
Right.
uh, that Dave Palacastro had put a table in a comic shop, and it was open to students to come down. And I'll get back to that whole dynamic of mentoring. But
Sure.
Deb became aware of some of her students going and playing at this comic shop, and she went down and recognized the value that this game was having on their social and emotional well-being.
Huh.
And so she got involved, and she ended up kind of pairing up students in a kind of a student leadership group in her school with the foosball players on Friday,
That's great.
and the groups had a lot of overlap and merging going on. Some of the student leadership folks became foosball players, you know,
Huh.
and some of the students who were not involved in student leadership got involved in the student leadership group
How cool is
because
that?
you had this intersection of peer groups, which goes back to a point we made earlier. You know,
Mm-hmm.
students getting to meet folks that they wouldn't have otherwise met. Um, so, and then we have other people who come alongside, and they're steady donors. We've
Okay.
had some, you know, large ticket donors who've given us money and said, "Look, we want to help put tables in schools. You know, here's some money." And then we have some small donors who support us on a routine basis. There's always room for more.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Of course. Of course. Yeah.
so, yeah, there's a great network that's growing.
Yeah. I
I don't know
definitely
if
want
that
to.
I don't know if that answers your question directly,
No,
but
no.
uh,
I do want to. I want to make reference to your website, foosballclubsusa.com. I think it's a great place to go if anybody who's listening now or in the future to this podcast wants to help. That's a great place to go, place to donate. There's a page already set up there, so you can click on the link and make your donation and really push this thing along because it really is a successful story and it's working in so many ways. What I'd like to,
yeah,
I
you mentioned the website. There's just another way. Brian Henricks helped us, you know, put together this website.
okay.
Took the clunky one that I had made and totally revamped it and made it look much
It
nicer.
looks
You
great.
know, so that's other ways that people get involved, and sometime for short duration times to give us a hand,
Hmm.
to work on a project, but that's what makes it tick.
Now, how about physically volunteering for Foosball Clubs USA? Now, are you looking for people to do things like organization in school districts, or let's say let's say a team that goes across the country and tours and goes to various schools to give presentations?
All of those things would be wonderful. You're probably aware that at the moment, um, all of our programs are sort of on hold
Okay. Right.
due to COVID.
Right.
I retired in June with big plans of hitting the road and going
Yes.
and visiting each of these programs and personally showing up and encouraging and helping them branch out. Uh, and of course, that all was on hold. Although I seek to stay in touch with our mentors through email, through text, through phone calls. Um, we still have people responding to find out how they can help. And what we have developed is kind of a punch list of things that we could use some help with.
Okay.
And so if we had people come to us and say, "Hey, what can I do?" One of the things I usually do is kind of play 20 questions and find out, okay, what is their passion? What is their motivation? Are they looking to help start a program at a
Mhm.
school? And
Mhm.
so, what do they want to accomplish? If they want to start a program at school and then um, are looking for our assistance, well, that is what I can give them.
Okay.
If they just say, um, I have these skills. How can you use me? Then we'll try to put them to work.
Ah,
Whether it's
okay.
here's some examples, real specific examples. Um, we have all of these great testimonials, these stories, these accounts that could be written up into
Right.
short articles and submitted to newspapers. Feel good stories. Personal interest stories,
Yep.
promotional stories, um, and I have done that. I've put them in our local paper, and of course, our mentors will put blurbs into their school newspapers at times. We've had interviews of some of our students and some of their parents. When we had one fellow, he was heading off to Germany
Yes.
to play over in Germany in 2017. The
The
uh,
World Cup?
Rochester, New York TV crew came over and did an interview during one of our Saturday tournaments and interviewed not only the young man but his dad.
Cool.
Who talked about how his son was kind of like adrift and all he'd like to do is play video games. And then foosball came along and he found a community. And so to write those stories up and find ways to place them
Yes.
in the print media, in social media. Right now, I use Facebook and I do my posts in Facebook, but
Okay.
I would love to have somebody come alongside and say, "Hey, let me show you how you can use these other social media uh, avenues."
Well,
Um,
you need a social media specialist, somebody
we,
who's
we
is
do, and
well-versed,
and
yeah.
and we need people with experience in areas, or simply with time. If someone would say, "Look, I've
Sure.
got 3 hours a week. What can I do?" We would find out what their skill set is. Um, Another thing is we're looking to reach out, and I do some of this. I recently reached out to the AAU, the
Mhm.
American
Okay.
Athletic Union. We want to reach out to other youth sports related organizations for a number of purposes to say, um, here's our sport. How can we cooperate? How can we inject our sport into the host of things that you already do?
Okay.
Like AAU, it has a wide uh, offering of sports. How can we fall under that umbrella? How can we bring uh, foosball to it? Because all of the benefits that we see in our schools can also benefit through the AAU organization.
Okay.
Um, the
Okay.
YMCA's, they are very competitive in some areas. They have a great swim program. We'd love to see uh, a connection with the YMCA's and say, look, each of you guys can have it for recreational, or you can have a competitive team.
I
Um,
remember, I think our YMCA actually had a Roberto Sport table. I think something like that at one time in the part of their they had like a center in the back of the YMCA where they had like a jukebox and tables and chairs and sort of like
Yep.
a
Yep.
snack booth and this kind of thing, and a foosball table, as I recall. This was
Sure.
back in the early 70s. But yeah, you don't see that too much anymore.
No, and one of the challenges, it's not insurmountable. One of the challenges with non-school settings, and we'll say like youth centers,
Hmm.
is the if it's only out as a recreational uh, activity
Yeah.
and not being taught as a serious game with rules. And if somebody's not maintaining the table, there's so
Right.
many youth centers I've gone into, either because they invited me or it's a local one I just popped into, and they have a table, but nobody who plays would want to play on it.
Sure.
You know,
Right.
the
All
bars are
messed
all
up.
gummy, the men
Yeah.
are broken,
Yeah.
they're mismatched. Nobody can find the foosballs, and so you need someone who's going to take ownership really of the program. And so we've had a few situations where players have come and said, "Hey, look, I want to reach out to my YMCA or my youth center, and
Hmm.
we'll help them, make those inroads." But if there's not a buy-in from the youth center to maintain a consistent program, then it usually doesn't get off the ground. And that's the one of the reasons that we push very heavily schools.
What
And
about
so, yeah,
What about the idea, and this is something I encountered in Europe. It seems a lot of cities have what they refer to as a foosball training center. It seems
yep,
to be a very common thing. Obviously, in Europe, it's a different thing. But in this country, I've never encountered a quote unquote training center where you go in and you pay a couple of bucks or whatever if you're a guest, and there's multiple numbers of tables and scheduled DYPs, and of course a place where someone could go, let's say after school or with a school group, to be specifically, brought into this training center and exposed to this whole idea of playing it as a sport, how to play the game. Here are the tables we use. We're going to do this every week for the next 8 months or whatever the case. And it seems to me training centers would solve a lot of those issues.
yeah. The training center model is one that we have our eye on,
Okay.
and would love to grow into. We're in touch with folks over in the Czech Republic, and Radek Dre over there. That's what he swears by.
Yeah.
Is the training centers, and the uh, their approach to schools is more, let's just go in and do a clinic and excite the kids
Hmm.
about what they can learn if they come to our training center.
Right.
And if the training center is established already, then that's a reasonable approach. Um, Here, we find ourselves taking a different approach of growing it in the schools, and then as the player base grows, here's what we do envision.
Okay.
It's like gymnastics.
Yeah.
Many schools have gymnastics programs, and my school had a gymnastics team. Um, but or soccer is another one
Oh, sure.
where many schools have soccer, but then there's club soccer
Yep.
where if you're even more serious, you might go and sign up for the club
It's a
program.
community
And if
league.
you are serious about gymnastics, maybe you just don't have enough time in your school team, or it's not year round and you
Mhm,
want year round. And
mhm.
so you'll join a gymnastics school. And so I can envision as the player base grows and students become a little bit more serious, they may want that training center. And of course, it could be adults as well as youth,
Sure.
go to the training center.
Cover
And
all
so
all
that is
aspects.
definitely on the table as one of the goals to pursue.
I love that
Um,
idea. I think it's wonderful. To me,
yeah,
it just makes so much sense. You think about, karate or taekwondo
yep,
dojos.
yep, yep,
These are, found in strip malls, for goodness sake, where you
yep,
go in and you learn to train in martial arts, and it has nothing to do with your school necessarily, although
right,
you may be training with, school kids. It's
yep,
still that ever present. It seems like every town has got those. Why not foosball?
And Tom, it still remains to be seen how things are going to move here in the U.S. because the training center and the local club
Mm-hmm.
could overlap.
Yeah.
They could be the same thing. One maybe one community has a training center, and that training center has a club,
Right.
or it could be that there are clubs that accomplish the same goals and purpose of the training center.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and so really, we're such a large country,
Yeah.
and different regions may manifest in different ways. There's just so much room for players to develop the sport and the game.
So
Um,
now, when it
yeah.
comes to the say, since we're on this topic, and once again, I do want to remind those of us who've just joined in to listen to this conversation on Foos Talk Live. We are talking to John O'Brien from Foosball Clubs USA, and we're talking about the past, present, and future of the sport of foosball, especially when it comes to developing new players. That's really our focus for our Super Sunday show. And John, again, thanks for joining me. But
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah.
yeah. So now, if we go beyond the training center idea, what about college, university campuses, things like this? What's happening with those? Because I know that when I was going to college, we had a rec room in our college union that had two or three tables, and it seemed like there was quite a bit of activity there. That was 1978. So,
Yep. So, yeah, I'll tell you what we're trying to do with college, and then remind me to get back and answer even more of what we would do if somebody had 3 to 5 hours a week to help us.
yes, of course, yeah.
There are other things, uh, but we did recognize that we want to expand into colleges. When I played, there wasn't a serious program, but they were just tables
Hmm.
in the dorm rec rooms. There wasn't any kind of club, although occasionally we would organize, a tournament, um, but there was no organized group. And so I put out feelers and contacted some of our now college students to form a group, a working group,
Okay.
who is exploring two things. One, uh, who's the right office at a college, at their college, to approach about starting a foosball program.
Hmm.
Is it
Okay.
the student life, organization? Is it who handles intramural sports? Who handles club sports?
Yes.
Uh, and then we've asked them also to explore and look into uh, broader, more umbrella groups that would provide activities to numerous colleges. And so try to work both ends toward the middle. Start on a campus, kind of like what we did with a local school program, and then look to see, are there umbrella organizations that could provide. And
Right.
maybe Foosball Clubs USA would become that umbrella organization,
Sure.
or USTSO. And so right now we have uh, three fellas, Thomas Ogdenbein and Ojibara and Logan Hearn, who have agreed, and we've met a few times and kind of mapped out some things for them to
Cool.
approach and do. And we've put together a simple document that they might take to the proper office of,
Mm.
why should the college start a foosball program? What are the benefits? So
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 it's
we're in the process of exploring that. Yep.
Yeah, it seems similar in so many ways because you're starting with schools, grade schools, high schools, and then moving up the ladder to colleges, and then out into the community. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah. So that then of course, how do we make that connection? Okay, let's say you've got a great program in your local, college or high school, whatever there, and you've got a decent player base. How do they get onto the community and start competing? So shall we say legitimately with, let's say, a local DYP?
Well, I I guess there's two ways I could look at that. Are we talking competitively
Yeah, I would
in
say,
the
yeah,
community, or
yeah.
are we talking about just spreading the game to the community for exposure?
Well, how about both?
Yeah. Um, The competitive one would be, again, your local club,
Mm-hmm.
probably is the best avenue to then become the sponsor of DYPs.
Right.
Or not just DYPs, but use the Swiss system or use a round robin system. Come up with whatever's going to work, and we've done this in my school and other school programs. Uh, they'll sometimes run a round robin during lunch, and it might
Yes.
last for a couple of weeks.
Okay. Okay.
So that you have time to play everybody.
Ah,
Um, in my school, and in I know Mark Drillette's school, uh, we have such a large program now that when we have our New York State tournaments, we really can only manage about 50 players
okay.
because it's a 1 day event. And so we've now, any given year, we'll have 6 to 8 programs that send kids. And so you have to sometimes limit. Where when we first started, it's like it was Mark's school, my school, and a few kids from Oswego that in my hometown that we got involved, and then we had a few kids from Syracuse, and then we had a few from Albany from the 518,
Sure.
and that was it. Well, now we have so many schools that the larger ones have to have some internal playoffs.
Huh.
And so
Wow.
we'll use our lunchtime and after school programs to narrow down the field. And so now there's playoffs to get onto the travel team.
That makes it
Um,
that much
yeah.
more intense.
Oh, it does. Now getting back to your original question about community.
Yes.
So I would see a local player group being the best avenue.
Okay.
Now, it could be that somebody doesn't have a player group and doesn't have a whole bunch of players in their community, but they're an active player.
Right.
Well, maybe the way they form the player group is to contact uh, local YMCA or somebody else and pull together a few tables
Mm-hmm.
and hold an event and see who
Okay.
comes out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
It could be that you get people that, oh, I used to play back in the day, and oh, I forgot how much I love this, and all of a sudden, boom, they're hooked again. You
Yes.
know, and so if you build it, they will come, right? So you
So
you
they
hold
say.
a
So they
foosball
say.
event, and you see who comes.
Well, John,
Um,
one of the things I just want to, just kind of comes to mind. It's like, okay, when you're a kid, and this is typical American kid, right, who grows up loving baseball, right? So you're a kid, you play Grasshopper League, then you play a Kiwanis League, and then you get into
yeah,
Little League, and then of course you play in high school, and your goal is to get onto the college team, and you get on the college team, and then you want to go on to the big leagues, right?
yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice if foosball had that same path, that same kind of tracing you could take from grade school all the way through to the big time, and maybe have to pass a draft or get drafted by a particular
Yeah,
group?
it, it's certainly a possibility. And like I said, there's so much room for
Yes.
growth. And I can envision those things now, where if somebody asked me that 5 years ago, I'd be like, well,
Yeah.
maybe, but now I can really envision that because we're connecting dots. We're
Right.
connecting, you know, recreational players to more serious players to folks who are willing to travel to folks who
Hmm.
travel overseas now, and the larger foosball community. Again, it could be reflection due to COVID. It could be that they've just been around enough to see, okay, we either grow or die.
Yep. Yep.
That people are talking about broader programs, and so yes, I can definitely see that happening. I
So,
can even see a legitimate pro tour like you have, the PGA tour,
oh, that'd be cool.
where
Yeah.
it's only select players are out there, but we just don't have the spectator base
Yeah.
to support something like that.
And I
Because
think
if you want a real pro tour, you need sponsors with real money who are paying to get
mm,
people's eyeballs on their product.
yep.
And we just don't have enough at the moment to attract them. But I think we're not too far away from taking some steps in that direction.
So we can see the pieces of the puzzle. We just don't see how they fit together quite yet. Is that what you're saying?
There's some missing in between. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're working on the edges.
Right. And
of that puzzle.
when it comes to being a part of an organization like this, I mean, you're a founding member of Foosball Clubs USA. You're big involved now with USTSO. What are your challenges? What's going on? What's holding you guys back?
Let me answer that a couple of ways.
Okay.
Some of it is time and manpower,
Mm-hmm.
because it's easy to envision how things could be, but then there's all these sort of boring logistical steps that have to
Sure.
take place in order to get there.
Yeah.
At the moment, everybody involved in USTSO and everybody involved in Foosball Clubs USA are all volunteers. And I know that all of our executive board, all of our volunteers, whether they're tournament directors, other people providing services for our website and things like that, everybody's volunteer.
Right.
And so you can't run a successful business with just volunteers. Eventually,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to collapse. It's a house of cards. And so part of what we have to do is get in place some funding that is going to pay to keep the lights on and the doors open, so that
we're coming
somebody
back to that again.
is answering emails. Look who's back.
Yeah.
Look who's back.
Yeah.
Jim Stevens, the voice of
John, I couldn't resist
Mark's
you doing
coming
it.
on.
Mark's coming on.
If
Oh,
Mark's coming
no.
on, I got to jump in too.
I couldn't resist.
What's up, Mark?
I just love you guys. John, you're my favorite.
Oh, no.
You're like the Pope. You're like the Pope of foosball.
You probably say that. You probably say that to all the guests. Yeah.
No,
He
man,
does, yeah.
No, there's very few people doing like philanthropy
Yeah.
that care about growing. Dude, seriously,
Right.
you have a heart of gold. But I gotta ask you a question. I was compelled to call for a reason, and so
Not just to harass.
and to hear my own voice and make sure that my stamp wasn't on the show. No.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you said. Sorry, Tom. I'm not even gonna let you talk. Bro.
That's cool. That's
You're
cool.
done. No. Seriously. So I right now I have a strong focus on growing the spectator side of the sport.
Yep.
But if I was interested in growing the player side of the sport, which I don't have the bandwidth or energy to do, that's why God bless you. Anyone who's focusing on that, I want to support that side. But it's a labor of love. So let me focus in on my question. If I was focused on building the spectator side of the sport, what are the limitations? What is to stop me to going to 4 frat houses and dropping off a table at each frat house and saying, here's a rule book and here's a website where you can see what these guys are doing. I'm having $1,000 tournament in 9 months. You guys got to learn how to play this because you guys are playing each other in 9 months. And just and get everyone crazy about a tournament coming up, maybe 6 months down the road. And I have packages to go to the next tour event. And I got the Illinois State Championship they get entry fees to. Why can't I just drop off tables at frat houses and get a bunch of, and no disrespect, I'll get sororities too. Let's drop them off with both. But why can't, what's the problem there? There's some strong limitation on that. And I think it just seems like a cleaner solution than going to the clubs or like whatever the other
campus organizations.
You're saying. Tell me why can't I do it? Tell me.
You can.
Go for it.
I agree. You can
simple
do that.
answer is you can do that. But now, what do I see as the limitations?
Yeah.
Is what's going to be the quality of the player that comes to that event? We've had people who've just said, "Well, I'll give you money. Can we just donate a table to a school?" It's like, you know what? I guess I'd rather see a table donated to a school than not. But what's even better is if we help develop a program, so that there's continuity. That they learn how to play correctly. They learn how to maintain the table. They connect with other players and organizations. So it's not just a flash in the pan. And that's what you can see is if there's no investment in continuity, then it's just a moment in time.
So
and then
okay, let me rewind a little bit. You're right. Let me agree with you. So I got to send a pro in there.
That's
I
of
gotta
course
send a
why you
local
asked
pro
that
in there.
question. Yeah.
Yeah. I got to send a local pro in there like once a month, because what's going to happen is we beer all over the table. These guys are going to be spinning the rods. The balls are going to be missing, right? They're going to be, and they're like, these are
men are
minors.
broken,
Yeah, men, broken men. So I got to send a pro in there and make sure. But it just feels like people lose their mind. Like if when I was in college, if there was $1,000 foosball tournament, which breaks up to what, $300 for first place, or I would. My friends would have lost their minds. Are you kidding me? We're going to play this game for $1,000. We got to do this. It's
Right.
branding, it's marketing. You really can't just drop off a table. But it seems like I don't know, man. I just think that's one way to do it with that demographic.
Well, that could be a portion of the formula.
Go ahead, Tom.
No, I was going to say that could be a portion of the formula. I mean, you could do a little of that, seeding the lawn, so to speak, and see what happens. But I'm kind of on the side of John here. It's like, you have to say, okay, certainly a table in the right place at the right time is fine, and as long as there's some guidance and a little bit of incentive, sweeten the pot with $1,000 tournament. There still has to be, a little bit of the rules tossed in. You got to have some semblance of, okay, this is a sport, and there are some things you need to know before you're going to go and win $1,000.
The other item the other item that I would have you have to throw in there is like, hey, so do you have somebody who's willing to drop that kind of money and organize a tournament? There's really nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Make it a community tournament and say, no pros involved. The question is, do we have people who are just willing to invest in the game like that? And those are some of the pieces of the puzzle, is people with big hearts and sufficient wallet to say, look, I'm not going to get anything out of this. I'm just willing to donate and seed a program. Absolutely. There's a place for that, but will that alone build the sport up? Probably not, because it takes more investment of people's time to actually mentor these people and make sure that the program continues even after the tournament's over.
Yeah, for sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Oh yeah,
yep.
Absolutely.
No, Jim, I can't. Jim, you're invisible. Jim, you're invisible.
Okay, I felt like I was there for a bit. 31-9 final score at Super Bowl. Amazing performance by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady, just ridiculous what he's doing in his early 40s.
43.
But a couple of things you said, John. The one, and I think Tom, you alluded to this as well. All the pieces are there, right? For 27 years that I've been doing this job with Inside Foods, commentating foosball tournaments, traveling around, really being in touch with what's going on the foosball scene in so many countries, and in particular this one. But the pieces have always been there, and it's a matter of organizing those pieces, getting into a system or multiple systems that allow for growth of the sport through what you're talking about, with these guys being involved with the system. Of course, what you're doing, John, with Foosball Clubs USA. There was a back in the late 80s, late 70s, early 80s, there was a college program that had 4,000 or 5,000 players across the country playing in a college foosball program as well.
Cool.
A lot has been going on during this time, this COVID time, which I think a lot of us are kind of looking at what we can do moving forward. And we talked a little bit about this last week, guys.
Yep.
But what we can do to tie all these things together, right? We have the people, we have the manpower, we have the vision, and now it's just a matter of bringing it all together and making it happen. And I'm confident that is going to happen. But it is going to take organization. Now, and this brings us around to the club system. Not Foosball Clubs USA. Let's not confuse them.
Yep.
The club system, of course, is something headed up right now by Jerry Todd under the auspices of the USTSO. Clubs in every city, multiple clubs in every city, giving us infrastructure, giving us the ability, Mark, to send that pro down to the college to fix that broken man, or to give them some focus. We will have this sort of structure that allows us to utilize these troops on the ground in these different areas. And John, you're a big Foosball Clubs USA guy, of course, but you're also a big club system guy, and what can happen in that arena as well, and how those things all tie together. So looking forward, looking ahead the next year or two, obviously we've all sort of got to accelerate out of this muck that we've been in for the last year. But using the club system, using Foosball Clubs USA, USTSO, Inside Foos plays a role in there somewhere as well. The international community, all of these things tying together. Do you see? Can you see it? Can you see that roadmap? Can you see that puzzle being put together to where all these pieces fall into place? And we do have what we envision.
Are you asking me, Jim?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. I do, and I see the club system being the structure, and I think Jerry was insightful in seeing that system in other countries, as you have yourself and others have seen, and trying to bring them back here. And I think folks who are not immediately interested in a club system are also many beginning to see that, oh, it's not an either or. This is not working against anything else we're doing. It's just adding to what we have and could actually enhance what we're doing. I mean, right now, the current world of U.S. foosball centers around the Pro Tour, what we call the Pro Tour. And a club system doesn't need to take away from that. Matter of fact, a club system might end up feeding it because you're recruiting people in your local community, and then some will be content with just playing locally, or their work or family situation will only allow them to play locally and not travel. But a certain percentage of them will say, "Oh, I need to test my skills against these other guys," and they'll want to travel. So it's not an either or. And that's where training. We before you guys jumped on, Tom was asking about training centers. Well, training centers could stand alone, or active local clubs could become those training centers.
Yes.
Where it's not like your DYP, where the new person comes in, played in college, wants to try their hand and gets crushed and doesn't come back. But a club where they're actually treated like a valuable new member who you don't want to scare away, that you want to teach the basics to and accelerate their learning, and put them in appropriate competition. So I see the club system even benefiting the school system, because now you've got people on the ground who are from that community, who are willing to go out, reach out to the school where their kids go to school and say, hey, we have this club over here. We have people who could come in and teach in your after school program.
Right.
So, or hold a local tournament. You can send your kids over to our facility, where we have our club meetings, and they can use our tables, since you as the school don't have a table yet. So I see it as the framework that the whole system can be built around. Absolutely.
This is an exciting thing to think about and to talk about, of course, and it just kind of feeds on itself. The enthusiasm. It's now, like Jim was just saying, we've got to get ourselves out of this muck, this COVID thing.
I was taking a breath there. Let's see if somebody else wanted to jump in. The club system can also feed a college system, because
Sure.
if there's a college in your community, now you have local players who can train. It could feed a company and corporate league system as well, because you have who better to reach out than the local people who are in that community, and donors.
Mhm.
So your local club members reaching out to their business that they work in, or to other businesses, and say, hey, sponsor the school program. We'll go in and we'll mentor, but they need decent tables.
Yeah.
Cough up some money for some tables. And if it's a school appropriate business, we'll slap your name on the table if you want.
Yeah. No, it's
So
one of our listeners is just chiming in, saying it's always best when people with skills that are similar to one another play each other. I think that's something that should be better managed. True beginners versus true beginners. I think that's reiterating what we just said. But yeah, absolutely. And it is something, once they get the bug and they get addicted, and they start to move up the ladder and feel like they want to play up against somebody who's a little bit better, because that's how you get better at the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Open up those avenues.
But it needs to be managed, and that's what you just said. That's the thing that really stood out for me as well, John. Is that they need to be playing against appropriate competition. How many times over the years, and I can attest to this, to where maybe 5 out of every 100 players who get playing, are able to run through that gauntlet, are able to swim upstream, so to speak, and get through that and be able to overcome those 5-0 losses to these great players. A club system allows you, the club itself has the motivation. They want you to succeed. They want you in the club. And they're going to make sure that you don't play over your head, that you come along at the right pace, and whatever that might be. And for every player, it's different.
Jim, that's it.
So important.
And I think that mindset is catching on and developing, and as we articulate it, and I hear it, from other people. When I'm at a tournament, folks will come up to our table and they'll share that account, and so the desire is there. But if we can get players to see that, hey, this is for the good of our sport, we need to be sort of evangelists for our own game, and draw people in, because it's going to benefit all of us by bringing people in at every level. Yeah.
One of the things that we hear about in Europe, again, I go back to that model because they're so far above us as far as participation is concerned. There's a foosball table in every company, like every office, every break room, across the Europe, and especially in Germany for some reason. But it's like part of their culture. And it's even more prevalent than let's say for us, playing noon ball at the YMCA with basketball. It seems much more common.
John, what the hell is going on in Iran? Dude, what the hell is going on in Iran, man? What is this? Like they thought like it's a Olympic recognized sport, and they're playing like on the streets. Tell me, what the hell? You know what's going on? What's happening?
My understanding.
Yeah.
You're always trying to stir the pot, aren't you? My understanding
Yes, sir.
Is that the Iranian Federation received recognition from their National Sports Federation, which some countries are able to do that. And we have reached out to the U.S. Olympic Committee, and we've had good communication with them. Terry Roux reached out as soon as he took over the presidency, and we appear to have gone as far as we can at the moment. There's some countries where the National Olympic Committee won't recognize you until your international body moves farther along the process. And so right now, ITSF is a GIAF observing member. They're not a full member yet. They just have observer status. And so right now, our U.S. Olympic Committee is saying to us, okay, well, as soon as your international body, ITSF, is a full member of GIAF, then that's when we can consider recognizing you nationally here. But some other countries are not set up that way. And so they're approaching their sports federation and they're getting recognized, which is actually good, because that's momentum in the right direction.
Right.
Yeah, at least puts it on the radar of those Olympic committees.
Well, it also it also helps ITSF move forward in their path by saying, see, some of our federations are now recognized. They have to have 40 countries that have legitimate federations with training programs, and this is also where our youth programs come in. One of the requirements is that there be a training program for our federation. So.
Yeah, let me give a little background on Iran. I mean, Mark just jumped in there trying to stir the pot. Probably was going to bring up nuclear agreements here in a moment. But the thing about Iran, and I've experienced that Iranian team at the World Cup. They've reached the quarterfinals on a couple of different occasions that are really good. And for me, the challenge is always pronouncing those names, some of which those last names are at least 20 letters long, and I'm not exaggerating.
Wow.
But they play Tornado. They play Tornado in Iran. And of course, the relationship of Iran and the United States has been a tenuous one for decades, right? But I have found, and I have a particular memory of the Hamburg World Cup, where I was approached by a couple of young Iranian players, very young, 15, 16 years old, guys who were sort of at the bottom of the totem pole on the Iranian team. And they said, came up and they said, you're Jim Stevens, right? We watch all of your videos.
Oh, wow.
And this is Iran, right? This is Iran. And they treated me as a foosball player, that with respect for what I've done, etc., without that stigma of being an American.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we have found internationally. And I think it's one of the things that really is a big statement on what the foosball community is like, no matter what the politics are, no matter what the situations are in different countries, previous relationships or preconceived notions, whatever. We are all foosball players. We're all members of the same family. And when you talk in Iran and the United States, it doesn't get really more polar opposite than that. But, it was really cool to talk with these guys who did speak English, didn't have any of these preconceived Jimmy Carter era notions, Ayatollah Khomeini, et cetera, and to speak with them about that. And then also to recognize the fact that they play on Tornado. And some of these guys that play over there are of a pro level on Tornado and are becoming better and better multi-table players. So I just wanted to give a little background on Iran and on their attempts to become an Olympic sport. And one final thing on that, my point of view has always been, I'm a sports fan, right? I'm an Olympic fan. For me, foosball has never been something that the Olympic Committee was going to seriously consider up until recently. I've kind of changed my views on that. I know the ITSF has pursued it. These individual countries do. The world is changing, right? Things are changing. And if we can have the impact, if we can take foosball to where we all envision it can go as far as a national and international profile, perhaps it's a possibility. I've always believed in the pursuit of it becoming an Olympic sport because that was a good thing. But now I kind of think maybe someday it could happen.
It seems to me, especially with John growing the youngest members of our sport, perhaps in the not too distant future, it could be the status of let's say the football captain who gets all the chicks, who someone instead is on the foosball team getting all the chicks.
Wait.
Right?
How do you go from Olympic sport
Well,
to chick magnet?
that's where it has to start, right? You have to have that kind of status in order for people start to recognize, hey, I'm actually getting some attention from anyway, I think this is where it all comes from. The Olympic status has to come from a respect as a sport. It needs to be, and it needs to be grown. So,
well, and that touches back. I think, Tom, you were asking me, what do we do to change the mentality of foosball as a bar sport?
Yes.
So I'll continue my response in that. Well, basketball is a schoolyard sport. It's played for fun. It's played on the street with a portable basket that's brought out there, but it's also played in schools and rec rooms, and it's played seriously. It's played just for fun.
And it's a billion-dollar
there's people
industry.
of all walks of life that play it, and it's Olympic sport.
Yeah.
So it's got the full breadth of people. It's fun and it's serious and it's competitive, and foosball can be the same way. And so, yeah, it is a bar sport. It is fun to play, but it could also be a serious international competitive sport.
Right.
So
let me ask you about that. It's very, very interesting. There's a duplicity there, and I'll tell you why. And I'm just interested to talk about it. I'm not stirring the pot. I'm just okay.
No.
All right.
I think when you say you're not stirring the
The
pot,
sound of your own voice, though. I gotta.
It's like there's just horns on me every time I just open my mouth. There's horns coming out of my ear. Okay, here's the deal, right? So there's this whole idea of darts in the UK embracing the nature, because it's a massive deal, right? I guess let's talk about it. So in darts, they get these like massive multi-million-dollar prize funds. They've essentially embraced the nature of their sport as a bar sport. It's a raucous sport. Like, the spectators are losing their minds. At the end of the day, it's guys throwing darts at a board. I guess there's some continuum there. I don't know how much that changes. And is darts an Olympic sport, right? Is darts an Olympic sport? I have no idea.
No,
not yet.
it's not.
No, it's not.
No.
It's not.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is in your opinion, John, you're saying that there's room for both. You're saying there's room for it to be a composed, professionally played game that has, the appreciation of that type of atmosphere. You don't have people like they're not screaming during what's it, the curling. You don't have people losing their minds during curling.
Yeah.
I love curling. Every 4 years, I love curling.
Yeah, right.
It's awesome.
It's so funny. But I guess you hear where I'm coming from. It's so well recognized. Darts is so well recognized and so well understood for the culture, embracing the nature of a bar sport. Do you think there has to be duplicity? Does foosball have to climb out of that to be successful and differentiate, or can it be successful the way darts is successful? There's a question in there somewhere. I have no idea.
That's a great
think
question.
Personally, I think foosball is and darts. I think darts is more than a bar sport, or could be.
Yeah.
I'll watch some dart tournaments on television that are in these not bars, but it's a kind of arena setup, with cameras focused on the players, on their faces, and then a split screen on the board. So it's taken it out of the bar and made it something else. In the same way that foosball could remain in the bar, and bars could have their competitions, and maybe that's where your club meets. But
Sure.
then there's another group that plays differently. I really see the place for foosball tables going back into bowling alleys and being a much more family-friendly environment,
Or even
in your bowling alleys.
most appropriately, we have several indoor soccer facilities in our
Yeah,
region.
exactly.
Why wouldn't
Yeah.
that be a no-brainer?
Yeah. It used to be in roller rinks, so that when you got tired of skating, you went and played foosball, or
Yep.
you played foosball on your skates.
Mhm.
And so
And I think that's necessary. Let me tell you why I 1,000% agree. When foosball is regulated to the bar, your average beginning player ends up in their 30s or 40s, and half the time has a drinking problem. That is a bad start right there, right? So I agree with you wholeheartedly. That was my contribution. Sorry, I disrupted you. Keep going.
no, it's great.
Are you implying I have a drinking
No,
problem, Mark?
and let me. I'd like to chime in on that as well. In the dart scene, it is, as John said, there are cameras set up on the players. There's the split screen and all of that. And I've actually done that before. I've actually covered dart events with Inside Darts back in the late 90s.
No kidding.
But there's that professional side of it. But for most people, for the general public, darts is viewed as a pub game. So you surround this professionalism, the multi-camera setup, the high-end competitive environment, just the supreme skill of these guys. You surround that with a party atmosphere, because most of the general public thinks it's a bar game, where in reality it's a sport. It is. Even darts is at the highest level. It is a sport, in my opinion.
Incredible. Yeah.
Same with foosball. You can surround it with that environment, knowing that inside that circle of frivolity, is this high-end professional sport. And so I think there is a balance that could be achieved there. Of course, we're talking to the guy that runs Foosball Clubs USA, and hopefully none of those guys are going to ever enter a bar till they're at least 21.
At least. At least.
And so there's also room for other types of environments as well. But when you're selling to the general public, which I think was what Mark was alluding to, perhaps we need to sort of give that impression to them that this fun atmosphere exists surrounding this very high-end play.
So
yeah, I think that's the challenge with foosball in brief. And you get John, if you listen to the show, I've beat this horse to death twice and back and reincarnated and buried. This horse has been beaten bloody. The idea is foosball has a disadvantage compared to just about any other thing. I don't care what other thing you pick. Foosball has a disadvantage because the casual observer cannot follow the ball. And let me tell you something. I was watching Ryan Moore and Robert Morris play Todd Lafredo and Steve Murray. And Ryan Moore hits the ball so damn hard and fast. I slowed it down, and I still couldn't see
fast,
it.
right?
I couldn't see where the ball, and I'm a pro who's watched plenty. I should be able to see where the ball is going. So now take my wife or her friends. They will never know where that ball is. Oh, they'll never know.
Right.
Okay. The disadvantage is you have a table with 4 people standing at it, and if there's no atmosphere around it, you can't really get people think that getting sponsors means growing the player base. And the unfortunate reality is if the player base
It's not
stayed
true.
exactly the same right now, if we had the
Yep.
exact same number of players right now, but we had hundreds of thousands or millions of people watching it, people would throw money at it. So that is
Correct.
what we were trying to figure out, creating the atmosphere
Generate
that
the
gives the
excitement.
spectators, because foosball is so disadvantaged as something to observe.
So it's a matter
Anyway.
of then it's a matter of just using technology to slow
Yeah.
the game down to
Super
the point
slow-mo.
where people can actually see what's
But
happening.
it's not just technology. You can give people instant replay. You can give people arrows. You can give people great commentary, like Jim does done for decades. You can give people all kinds of things. There's got to be an environment and an atmosphere around foosball too, and it may have
Yep.
to follow in the sphere
You mean on the
that
location,
darts does.
the location where it's actually being played. So in the arena, so to speak.
Right. You want them there in spite of the foosball. You want
Right.
it to be an event in spite of the foosball.
Yeah.
Is the idea.
And they're not caring about how they scored. They're just happy that somebody scored, that they can cheer about it, root for their team, whatever that adopted team is for that day or whatever. They don't
Well,
need to necessarily see the specifics of it, as the rest of us, being foosball aficionados, do.
yeah,
One other
and this
thing,
goes
John.
back to. Oh, go ahead, Jim. As
No,
I
you go
say,
ahead.
Tom and I were talking earlier about growing the player base, and
Yeah.
in my mind, it was growing the player base who uh, are in one aspect players in their own right, but then at the highest level they become the spectators, and they're interested spectators. So they have a vested interest. They've been following players. They've been following maybe a team that has played out of the club system and gone to their regional state championship, is now in the national finals, and so there's a vested interest in watching the outcome, not even like Jim said, maybe they didn't see where the ball went, but my team just scored.
Yeah.
Watching the World Cup, I'm sitting up in the stands, and of course, the table is projected on the screen over the players, but I'm also watching the 40-point clock, and saying, okay, we're ahead, we're behind, so there's the drama there. And so as you have players who love the sport, love the game, and then cheer for their side,
Their team.
their team,
Yeah.
that brings eyeballs on the game, and just it's enjoyable. I mean, when our team comes back from a World Cup championship, everybody's on cloud nine for a
Yeah.
while, and that's great,
Yeah.
and that's how it should be.
Well, think
You know,
about
we-
the phenomenon, which is European football or soccer. Manchester United. Anybody ever heard of that team?
yeah, yeah,
Right.
Mhm.
So, and then people from Manchester are just ravenous fans. I mean, because it's their team,
that's right. Yeah.
and they will kill each other to do that to prove their
Eh,
point. It seems.
So true. And you bring up a great point, Tom. The one advantage that they do have in Europe, talked about how there's a table in every pub, there's a table in every, whatever in Europe. And a lot of that is because of soccer, because
Mhm.
they are such incredible soccer fans. We just watched the Super Bowl here tonight in this country. NFL fans, NBA fans are we're crazy about that. They take it to another level in England and in Germany and in Belgium and in France, where soccer is everything.
Oh, yeah.
And it gives them an advantage, in terms of selling our sport. John, are there plans, either with Foosball Clubs USA, with USTSO, or whoever, to develop relationships with MLS, with Major League Soccer, which is a growing sport in this country? It is something maybe we can kind of align ourselves with moving forward. And as it becomes more popular, but it's a disadvantage in this country that soccer is not this huge thing as it is everywhere else. But are there plans perhaps to have relationships with the MLS or with soccer in this country?
Yep. So this gets back to a conversation Tom and I were having earlier about things to do. And yes, to answer the simple question is yes. On paper, it's been talked about. Wouldn't it be great, to develop these relationships? But so if somebody came and said, "Look, I've got a connection, with MLS. You want me to talk to them?" He's like, "Yes, please." Because most of the folks who are active, and you guys know because you're active, we're all like, one-handed, paper hangers, trying to, or trying to keep, 5 plates twirling at the same time. And so absolutely, that is just another area that could be explored and developed, is developing a rapport with MLS. So
Well, I can give you a quick.
So if anybody listening,
I can give you a quick
has a connection or wants to pursue that connection,
I can give you a quick
please let us
example of
know.
that, John. It actually happened during the time when the premiere of Foosballers the movie was traveling around the country.
Exactly. Yep.
When
There was talk. Yep.
a group of us went down to New York City, we went to the Soccer Hall of Fame museum kind of place in Manhattan, and they have a what they call kicking and screening night, where they feature soccer movies for a full weekend. And guess what movie was shown first on that kicking and screening soccer weekend?
It must have been Foosballers.
Yes, and they had a record turnout in the auditorium. Over 400 people showed up for that kicking and screening.
And it won awards. It won awards at that festival as well.
Right.
Yep.
So the tie-in, Greg Lawless, who runs that kicking and screening tournament, or shall we say festival, he was just overjoyed, and he's a pro soccer player.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be necessary, I think, moving forward, as we focus on where we can take this sport, what are the best ways to promote this sport to the outside world, so to speak. It's going to be necessary to develop a relationship with MLS, and I think it's something that's on all of our radar as we move forward. But before, I know we have about 10 minutes left, and before I have to go, or before the show ends, I just want to talk about how much I appreciate John O'Brien.
Yes.
This is a man who's only really been on the national foosball scene for 5-6 years now. And maybe I'm off a year or two on that, but this is a guy who has dove headlong into it. He's obviously doing the Foosball Clubs USA stuff, but he's an important member of the USTSO. He's had a lot to say about the club system in a very positive manner. And a guy that I think is going to be a big part of that puzzle we talked about earlier. As being someone who can bring a different perspective to this. And of course, the importance of the kids, and we can't overvalue that. And I just want to say, John, how much I appreciate you and what you're doing. And really, again, this last year, of course, we've all sort of been in neutral a little bit, a lot going on, maybe behind the scenes, but we're ready to burst out and really make some things happen moving forward.
I kind of think John's a con man. I don't know what his Ponzi scheme is yet. I'm going to figure it out, dude. I'm on to you, bro. I'm on to you. Follow the money. Follow the money.
He's the mole, man. He's the mole.
Hey, Mark, there's nothing wrong with following the money. That's how we started the first program.
Right.
My after-school program, I heard through the grapevine that they had extra money that they had to spend. So we bought 2 foosball tables. So we're going to follow the money.
Where exactly is the scam?
I've had an opportunity to talk to you a couple times. I have the greatest respect. I know you were a lifelong teacher, retired, but you got all the marketing savvy, moxie, charisma, confidence. You got it all, man. You got the whole package to do what you're doing. And I missed the first half of the show. I was busy watching a horrible football game. But I guess did you speak to? I'm going to listen to the show for sure. But did you speak to what are you into, man? Did you talk a little bit about the stuff you're doing internationally? Did you get into that stuff on where you've been putting your efforts?
We were too busy.
Yeah, man. Yeah. You got like 2 minutes. You got like 2 minutes, my friend. What are you doing overseas right now? Not that you're going overseas, but what are the efforts you got? Can you talk about that stuff with the ITSF?
Yes, I do. But I do want to make a point too that we've used the word puzzle here. Puzzle pieces, and I found myself just kind of being welcomed into this community of puzzle pieces. Many who had interests in certain areas, Jim with his broadcasting and, for years, and Rob Mars, who was, Mr. Team USA. And we don't want to lose any of those things, and our other high level players who, without them, we wouldn't have the Team USA and the Pro Tour, that we have, and Tom Muir's been heavily involved in the rules, and Jerry having his interest in the clubs, and I just go on with names of people that they're all busy in their own respective area. And I think what's happened is we're looking around and saying, hey, maybe there's a whole picture here, that we're all these individual pieces, and we just are finding each other and being knit into a big picture. And that's exciting. And I'm glad to be a part of it. And because of my involvement here, now to answer your question, because of my involvement in the youth programs, and so head of Foosball Clubs USA, but when ITSF started putting pressure on the U.S. players to organize ourselves, we formed USTSO, and one of the important elements or ingredients is a youth program. And so I was invited to be the head of the youth committee, and so that's what I did. Well, for me, it was like, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. There've got to be countries, federations, players that have educational material, that are doing things that could benefit us. So I just started reaching out and talking, went to the ITSF website, started emailing the people who are part of the education commission, and come to find out that, as happens with many volunteer organizations, it had become sort of inactive. Emily, who was in charge of it, turned her interest to other foosball related activities. And so they were just kind of adrift, and so because of my reaching out, I was asked, hey, would you take over as the president of this organization? Freed probably Freed probably knew that I was retired, and had some time. And so now I have the joy of working with some of these folks who have been laboring in education in their country, in their federation, for a number of years. And what we've been able to do is just a starter, is pull together and put into one place programs that have already been developed by the French Federation, the German Federation, the other countries that have done things. Fred Gower, with what he's done over in Taiwan, of course, now he's back in Canada. And we're just kind of putting that in one place so that we can go through it and sort of try to disseminate it, package it, so that it's more useful. And so that's the exciting thing. We have a meeting tomorrow with folks from Mozambique, who are interested in
Mozambique.
Starting a foosball federation. So I've been doing a lot, communicating with Will Hawks, who's in charge of the Federations Commission,
British.
and just trying to, in the same way that people here in the U.S. are being kind of pieced together and realizing that, hey, we can make a whole picture. I think what's happening is COVID has hit all around the world, and so people are being busy in their own country, and now reaching out to others. And we're trying to develop a certification program for foosball trainers. So that's, to answer your question, Mark, that's what I'm involved in, and just having a blast doing it, because it's really
you just described to me the plot for Fellowship of the Rings, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, as we discussed. And I just want you to know, I'm Aragorn.
Can I be Gandalf?
Kneeling very soon, but let's party. I
you
love
sure
this,
man.
you're sure do our piece.
Sure you're not Gollum.
Oh,
I can
man.
assure you, I'm probably Gollum. Okay, fine.
You probably are. Yeah.
I'm Gollum, but he has better teeth than me, so that's the horrible part about it.
I have the most gray hair. I'll be Gandalf.
So bad.
No, I've met you, Mark. I've stood next to you. You are definitely a hobbit.
Thank you, Gandalf.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's great. I love it. I love the comparisons. Well, John, I told you this is going to be a problem, right? These guys are going to jump in and they're going to, well, anyway, it made it so much more fun, at least. So first of all, we want to thank you for not only what you do, but what you continue to do. I mean, and the future, of course, is bright, because you and so many other people are involved in, getting this thing together.
Well, glad to be here. Like I said, never intended to start anything, and was so thrilled just to be sort of welcomed into the active foosball community. It's a family,
Yes.
and folks have said that before.
Mhm.
It's an exciting group to be a part of. And together we can really expand the sport without losing any of our component parts, because everything that's being done is important and necessary. We just kind of need to knit it together and add a few items to make it a whole picture.
Right. Absolutely. And you're
It's going to
always
happen, John.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
It is. It's
Yeah,
happening.
gonna
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
And the work
Yeah.
that you guys are doing through these broadcasts, particularly, I mean, though they were envisioned before COVID, but boy, have they really filled in the gap, with people wanting something foosball related.
Let's hope.
And you become you become a place where people can go to find out what's going on, and to hear from the past and the present and look to the future. So
Yeah.
good work, guys.
Well, thank you. And
Thank
we
you,
are
John.
we are out of time, but guys, Jim, Mark, thanks for jumping in after the big Super Bowl
Yeah.
celebration.
Thanks for
But,
tolerating us, Tom, and you too, John. Great to hear from you,
Yeah,
buddy.
yeah.
We'll talk soon, I'm
You're
sure.
the man, John. You're the man. Thank you, John. So
John,
much.
Okay.
It's been great.
And
Thanks, guys.
thanks
Cheers,
again,
guys.
John. We
Been
will
fun.
leave the door open. Come on back anytime. This is FoosTalk Live. I'm Tom Robinson with Jim Stevens, Mark Torres, and John O'Brien from Foosball Clubs USA. Thanks for listening. FoosTalk Live is a product of Foosball Radio and Inside Foos TV. All rights reserved. Our sincere thanks to 518 Prince, Foosball Clubs USA, Foosballers the Movie, and the United States Table Soccer Organization. Join us next Sunday for another episode of FoosTalk Live. In the meantime,
We'll see you foozin'.